Welcome back, everyone. After the short break, the second block will be moderated by Joanna Wojciechowska. Joanna, the mic is yours.
Hello, everyone. Welcome after a break. Welcome to the International Forum of Permaculture Educators. We have just listened to exciting presentations about sensibility in permaculture teaching and learning. And now we will move to the block about community. And this is important because our values and attitudes, including our moral systems on which we base our decisions on how to design places and economies, really depend on our communities of practice. And the permaculture communities are marked by an aspiration and practice of three-pillar ethics: the care of earth, the care of people, and fair share. So even in those three principles, the community aspect is very important. And in current pandemic moment, there is at once a lot of alienation and technological innovation that allows new communities to emerge and co-create an exchange like we're doing today between different European and international permaculture educators. So let's reflect together, how do our training methodologies strengthen inclusivity, our capacity to learn from the fringes and edges and patterns of our community? How do we create safe, sensitive, inclusive, and reflexive spaces for learning in diverse human groups? And in this block, we will, on the one hand, look at the individual starting its journey and the ways to support the group in learning from many individual learning processes woven together. And we will also address inclusion of migrants and intergenerational reconnection for a whole food system paradigm shift, for food solidarity and food sovereignty. In this block, we have the pleasure to hear a keynote presentation from international trainer and designer, as well as researcher, Tomas Remiarz, who has 20 years of experience of teaching and contributing significantly to mentoring other aspiring permaculture teachers and consultants. Tomas has also made a significant contribution to research on forest gardens in temperate climates and has been working in the UK Permaculture Association and different communities, and more widely in Europe, with an emphasis on restoration of land, buildings, and communities. As I welcome you, Tomas, for the keynote speech, and thank you for joining us. And we just need you to unmute, yes.
Correct, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Joanna, and welcome again, everybody. It's been really fascinating to hear what people were saying earlier on today. I missed a bit of it because I'm also enacting community in the place where I live. I'm part of a co-housing project in the countryside, actually, at the borders of Wales and England. And we're having a work weekend, so actually kind of everybody pulling their weight and doing stuff together, and so we just had a coordinating the work this morning, and I know what I'm doing later on then. And now here I am, like Joanna says, like we've got this opportunity to be in the place where we are and at the same time connect with people far away, which, kind of creates a new sense of community. There's also a risk that it creates a new sense of alienation and being dragged away into the world of social media and kind of never getting out of it, and so I think it's important for us to kind of keep our feet on the ground and kind of our hands in the ground as well. Like Joanna was talking about kind of that embodied care, so that yeah, we need to keep going. So talking about community, so I thought I'll give it the theme of growing community, because that is in a way kind of what we as permaculture educators are doing, so we are we may be pollinators, we may be, you know, kind of accelerators of processes. Oops. And yeah, so like let's look at a bit like what that role entails and how we can be useful and effective for the communities we're working with, whether they are our own communities or as educators we often will be called to work with different communities, you know, and kind of give them support in what they're doing. Yeah, let's start by enacting a bit of community and answering the question together, what does community mean to you? So yeah, just reflect on that for a few seconds and maybe use the chat to just give me words, you know, give me short phrases. What does community mean to you? Support people I love. Yeah. Community as an ecosystem. That's right. Yeah, we talked about that yesterday a bit. Family, responsibility, resilience. So sharing. Yeah. Great. Beautiful. Beautiful contributions. Thank you. Web of relationships, solidarity, acting together. All that and so much more. Yes, so a community is something we all experience and we all feel and kind of we all depend upon, you know. And so as Joanna said, kind of I'm mad about forest gardens, and being forest gardens for me are a fantastic metaphor of what communities are and can be. Oh, sorry, I'm struggling with the technology. But yeah, so forest gardens are fantastic examples of how communities work, what communities are and can be. You know, so the different types. So there's kind of, it's all about connections at the heart of it. You know, so it's about location. So the people where we are, you know, in that space, or people in the space where we work, you know, so like those people that are right at hand there and will want and need to get on together. There are, and within that and across those locations, there are communities of affinity. And we're here together because we all have an affinity with permaculture, education, and so on, you know, and so that kind of creates, there is an international community of permaculture teachers that we are part of here right now. And then there are communities of need, you know, so like people who are drawn together because they share the same sort of needs. I mean, my partner is involved a lot with the disabled community in this country, and who are one of the marginalized groups that depend on mutual support more than ever to give each other voice and give each other strength. And especially marginalized communities are often drawn together because of that need to support each other when the support by the mainstream is lacking, you know, and so it's worth being aware of that as well. And that's something as educators kind of where we can come and give special support as well. So if we're looking at kind of, yeah, how we as educators can act and support these, like the communities we work with, it's worth thinking about kind of like we are kind of people who can build resources, you know, kind of, I really empathized with Michael's point earlier on about kind of the kind of challenge of talking about resources, like talking about the world as resources, as people talk about community capital, you know, it's kind of, and I do find that difficult, you know, because that is kind of capitalizing everything, the danger of monetizing everything, and kind of that's definitely not where we want to go with the permaculture approach. However, economy, I mean, there's also the idea of the gift economy, where we're actually actively sharing what we have out of a sense of generosity. And if we're looking at like the different aspects of like that, the gifts we can share within and across communities, I think that's more in line with the permaculture approach. These are kind of like 7 types of different like kinds of wealth that a community can have or want to build or kind of feel the lack of. And it's interesting that people very often start with the 2 at the top, physical, financial, so what there is kind of in terms of like infrastructure, in terms of the kind of money, access to money, and starting with those kind of is almost like a recipe for making yourself feel poor. So whereas if we're looking at some of the other types of wealth, then we can start kind of really building from the ground up, and kind of other resources become available, and like we create them out of the relationships that we have. And so in a way, what I would say is that the true wealth of any community is in its people. So all the individuals, every individual within a given place or a given community will have unique contributions to make that depend on their skills, their experience, their life experience, their unique qualities, and all of those are valuable in themselves and can be shared with others. And then there is the social wealth that arises out of those individuals coming together and doing things together, interacting. So the when we come together, then kind of those skills get amplified and not just multiplied, so they come like grow exponentially by sharing with each other and by doing things together. And so that's the social wealth of a community. And then there's the cultural wealth, which connects us also across time and space. So we are always feeding, like our culture always fed by our ancestors, by the people that we inherit wealth from and kind of understanding from, stories from, and so on. And so looking at the gifts of people that come from before us, and kind of like basically like working on the stories that people give us is one way of thinking about that wealth. At the same time, looking at where is this going? So new ideas. How do new ideas come in? And so the new people, the younger people, often can bring in new ideas. And so that's culture is not something static. So it's like an evolving story, and kind of we are part of that. And as permaculture educators, we are kind of can make these stories, can help people bring these stories out and share those. So those are like the social, personal, and cultural aspects of community wealth. But if we're thinking about communities in a permaculture sense, then that goes beyond the human. So permaculture communities include all species. They include the landscape itself. And that's something that is often forgotten, especially in the urban context. And our role, in a way, is to let people hear, feel that connection with the land, and let people interact with the land directly and bring that back. So in a way, reveal the landscape that has often become invisible in urban places. Somebody talked about like rivers earlier on, and in Britain, in cities, rivers are often not visible. They're under the channeled under the road network and so on, and just flushed away, and just making it visible that there are rivers, and in the wider sense, making it visible that here is nature, nature is here, and then that people understand the processes. So how does nature work in this place? How does it express itself? How could it express itself as well? So giving a vision of potentiality, and not just of kind of the limitations that we're experiencing in the here and now. Also the potential of what a truly abundant city could look like. And then as a next step, the question, how do I fit in? So what can my contribution be to, or what can our contribution be to creating that abundant city that we know is possible? And so giving people the vision and then the tools to make that vision happen. And that, in a way, becomes a political process. Sorry, I need to wear my other glasses, I just realized, because I can't read what I'm written. So that is creating a self-awareness. So in a way, kind of that's how we activate those other gifts that we talked about, the natural, social, personal, and cultural wealth of the community is activated through creating a sense for the community of self-awareness, so that we are the community, we are the people we have been waiting for, so that we can rely on. It's us, it's up to us, it's not up to kind of somebody in the city hall or in the government building, so those people, we know we can't rely on them, we need to rely on ourselves. At best, those people can be allies and supporters, but they can never truly solve our problems. And so through giving ourselves that sense of awareness, the next step is then that kind of we can give voice to what is alive, what is important in that community. And there are always people who are very good at voicing kind of what is going on in the community, encouraging those people, and then also often people whose voice isn't heard, and kind of identifying who is on the margins and giving space and voice to those people as well is really an important part of our role. And out of creating that self-awareness and a community finding its voice, then comes a sense of agency. So the ability to actually affect the future of the community and make things happen, so by collective, by acting together, so by thinking about kind of what is individually necessary and possible, but also what can we do together. And what we find if we engage in that process is that we can do things that we didn't believe were possible sometimes, and kind of with having a vision and the determination to make that, to enact that vision, we can achieve almost anything. And I thought I'd share a little story about this, which is set in the northeast of London and starts on a small community garden, like a shared allotment in the northeast of London, where a group of friends of mine were just growing their food together, and growing their food together, they're dreaming about what is possible, so, and I visited them a lot and worked with them a lot, and we talked about how that northeast of London used to be the food basket for the whole city. So that's where a lot of the food was grown that went into the city of London, and which was like 20 years ago, was so far from the reality of what was actually going on. And so we discussed kind of, can we make this happen again? How? And then how can we make this happen again? And So people started inviting neighbors, friends to the allotment and started learning to grow food together. And through that, like, they learned about food growing. They also learned about sharing information, about making connections. And one of the connections they made was with a community center down the road that was like falling on hard times. Nobody was really using it. So there was a niche, there was an opportunity to actually use that as a catalyst for bringing people in, teaching people about food. Once they knew about how to grow food, they started sharing it. So they had a market stall on the street corner. They also started to share it through the kitchen and cooking food, teaching people how to cook food, how to use food, setting up a cafe, so starting to employ people. And we started to discover the hidden and forgotten food of London as well, because in that part of London, there are a lot of fruit trees that are on streets, on street corners, in parks, in people's gardens that aren't harvested. So we started harvesting them and started turning that into juice and cider and vinegar, and again, sharing that with the people. And suddenly, like having an apple press on the roadside, people start coming up and saying, "Oh, my grandparents used to have one of those in Bangladesh," or kind of we've got one of those in our village in Poland, and so kind of actually people like from across the world connected with that very simple technology, and we're starting to set up conversations across cultures, across generations. Children love getting involved, and so on. And so the potential and the base, the resource base of that group organically started growing considerably, and started growing to the point where they felt we can take on something bigger. And just as they were ready for doing that, the opportunity came up to occupy some greenhouses some commercial greenhouses right at the edge of London that the council had given up. They wanted to turn it into a flats. There was a local campaign to protect them. And this group organically stepped in and said, well, we can take them on and we can grow food for the people here, and they were not quite sure that they could, but they were sure that they could work out how, and so on. Bringing more, and what they realized was we need to bring in more people. We need to work on what we've already got and build on that. And that was about 10 years ago. Over the last 10 years, that project has grown and grown again through involving more and more people and training people in practical food growing, and also training people in how to organize, because what they realized that these were the two main skill sets that they had acquired over the 10 years that they've been working up to that point. That was about food growing, but it was also about how to organize in a community. And so now what they're doing is they're setting up, they're training people to grow food, and then they're training people how to set up their own food growing project in other parts of London. So from that one little allotment 20 years ago, this has now spread to a major food growing hub, and which then has spread and set up satellites and new places all across the city, and it's all across the country, because it is really one of those flagship projects that has inspired many people around here. So that is possible, and it's possible because people both had a bold vision at the beginning, but then also the understanding that this is not going to happen overnight. This is going to take time, and it's only going to work step by step. We don't know necessarily where we come out, but let's just go and start the journey. And here we are in 2020, and they have just been offered by the City of London another big set of commercial greenhouses in Tottenham, which is across the river, another part of the city, where they're setting up a similar hub to then inspire other people to grow food. So well done organically. And so this is a story of what is possible, you know, and kind of, and what I'd like to end this presentation with really is like these two questions, kind of think about the communities that you're working with or that you're living in. So what are the gifts in your communities? And what can and will you grow together? And so that's, and how will, and as a permaculture educator, maybe a third question, like how can you help other people to do this in their communities? Okay, thank you very much. That's it for now.
Thank you so much, Tomas, for this inspiring introduction and for grounding us in a very real model of local organizing for food gardening, for education, for political education. I also actually learned food growing at Organically, and yes, the spirit carries on. I would like to refer back to what you said, Tomas, inviting our first presenter, Marcelina Haremza. You pointed to the role of educators in, on the one hand, guiding people, newcomers, by hand to have the first experiences and gain confidence in contact with nature. But you also pointed to reaching out actively to the fringes and to those who might be unheard or might be shy to speak up or even express their needs. So thank you for pointing. And Marcelina's presentations very much will expand on this topic of really taking the beginners by the hand and raising their confidence. She will speak on positive garden psychology for beginners. And as a graduate from the University of Life Sciences in Poznań, at the Faculty of Horticulture and Landscape Architecture, she is now integrating permaculture in education in Poznań Food Cooperative through local gardening groups and through her blog, Garden Alternative. So welcome, Marcelina, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Joanna. Okay, so I will start from telling that each of us started out once. That's a fact. Now our experience and knowledge of gardening are impressive, which sometimes makes us lose empathy and understanding towards the clumsy steps of novice gardeners. Unfortunately, I sometimes see on permaculture Facebook groups when very experienced educators criticize the efforts of novice gardeners, telling them, and I will quote now, because of gardens like this, people think that permaculture looks like a garbage can. As a comment to the post in which a woman praised with great joy the first garden bed she made. Or the other educators that are complaining about the fact that they give people all the necessary knowledge on their blog, but they are too lazy to bother and read it. These were very shocking situations for me, which made me think it shouldn't look like this. And that is why the aim of my project was to support beginners, mainly from the mental side, which is, in my opinion, is crucial, because when we have order in our heads and hearts, it translates into order in our lives. So who am I addressing my message to? Let me tell my story. Because I lived in the countryside all my life, but meanderings of life lead me follow my husband to a large city in the heart of Greater Poland. And here I worked mainly with people who live in their apartment without access to garden, with no family traditions of growing plants, who now, as adults, wanted to grow their own garden or leave the city and start the farm in the countryside. It is a very interesting experience for me, requiring me to be mindful and be careful not to simplify things, because things that seem obvious for me are black magic to them. And because I am an empathetic person, I empathize very much with their situation and the problem they are struggling with. To prepare for this project, I created a survey for beginner gardeners in which I asked about a number of things, including the difficulties they encounter, but also what is the most valuable to them in their garden adventure. That is why my project is in the form of films that, in my opinion, have the potential to reach people at the beginning on their path to becoming a great gardener. The first one is intended for people who would like to start, but not have yet found enough motivation to grab a spade. The second one is aimed at people who have their own garden, but are a bit lost in the complexity of gardening issues. The third video that was born spontaneously is a garden meditation, which I hope showing my fascination with permaculture and the ability to observe calmly. I wanted it to allow beginner gardeners to let go of this constant need to control the situation and subdue nature. Okay, so the first film is a collection of many benefits of working in a garden, including contact with the living soil, addressing both the issues of physical and mental health and material benefits in the form of crops. These are arguments both from my experience and from the results of the survey I conducted. I think that is important at the beginning of your journey to be sure that it is really worth the effort. It makes it easier to deal with the difficulties. Okay, the second video aims to help people who are overwhelmed by the complexity of the issue. As advanced educators, we sometimes forget how many years of learning are behind us. For example, I have been working on a family farm since I was a child. I studied horticulture for 5 years, and I haven't been practicing as a permaculture designer and blogger for another 6 years. It's a lot of time, so I'm not surprised that people who have been teaching for 20, 30 years may have already forgotten what it was like to start. Be aware of breadth and complexity of the topic. Surveys show that this is a tremendously overwhelming experience, especially since many of the younger generation are characterized by unhealthy perfectionism and fear of failure, which make it difficult for them to take action. So the unfavorable comments of more experienced people do not help. The main function of this video was to show them that learning from mistakes is very valuable, and that mistakes and failures are a constant part of gardener's life. You need to learn from these mistakes and be grateful for the opportunity to learn. The third film, Garden Meditation, is a film that I designed to suit anxiety and relax, especially now in the spring when many people spontaneously start the adventure with gardening for the first time. Gardening forums have gone mad. Every day there's thousands of photos asking what kind of pest is it and what chemical compounds should be sprayed on it to kill it, how to get rid of tenacious lawn weeds, or a photo of lichens on the tree with a question, help me, my tree has some disease, what to spray to remove it. So we are taught to react immediately, and many people imagination is that we have to control nature. Solutions must be quick and effective. And with this meditation, I wanted to convey that before we start acting, it is worth trying to understand. Give yourself a space for reflection, slow down, let go of the need for control, and trust in the genius of nature and everything it has created. So my great intention is that each of us here who defined ourselves as educator, after this presentation, remember that what it was like to be a beginner, and thus have more space in his heart for understanding and empathy for people who are at the beginning of the journey. Thanks to this, more people will have a chance to start an adventure with gardening, which will heal the body, psyche, and soul, and making people and therefore our societies more balanced and happier. Okay, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Marcelina. First, reminder, valuable to remember the beginning and bring more empathy to sharing, learning process with others. Hopefully this will also connect very well with what Susanne Hofmann-Souki will contribute today in her presentation on experiential learning cycles in joint learning on farms, which already indicates the meeting of those who have more experience and those who are gathering and discovering the knowledge in themselves. Susanne has co-developed method of experiential and practical learning in many international project activities, as well as she's a lecturer in agricultural economics. She enjoys facilitating learning processes in groups, including at polyculture seminars on a pioneer polyculture farm in Austria. She also supports and contributes to networks of agroecological communities in Asia, Africa, Latin America, and Eastern Europe through Agroecol organization. She's a great methodologist and very good conveyor. So I welcome you, Susanne, to share with us your reflections on learning cycles.
Well, thank you. I'm afraid that was too much praise because I'm not going to tell you anything new. I think what you will see is things that you already know. Can you see what I see?
Yes,
okay.
We can see.
Great. Right, I think, yes, let me just dive directly into it. What I'm talking about is also something that I did before I knew what I did, so I guess you might have the same effect for you. Well, if you look at how learning happens, we've already heard yesterday 2 approaches to that, so I'm adding, and you might recognize well, I think one important point for me is that you always, that learning happens only when it's connected to some experience or some knowledge that you already have. It cannot be dislocated somewhere because then you cannot put it into any context. And it doesn't happen if you don't have some curiosity or some motivation, some question that drives you to wanting to learn. And this is how you start exploring. And I'm very grateful to Marcelina to mention the reflection part, because there you go. This is, I think, something that is happening as well during the learning process. Then you might form some sort of concept or theory or plan and want to test it. And this is then how you create such a circular, yes, experiential learning cycle, which, I didn't invent, obviously. It was David Kolb and some others who found that, and you find that in a lot of design processes where you try something, you observe, you maybe change the plan, try again, and so on and so on. The point is that the new knowledge is always connects to some old experience that you have, and everybody coming to any course or workshop also comes with some existing knowledge, even though they might not be aware. So there's a sort of like, I think the job here is only to make people aware of that this is happening and to be able to create spaces for that. This now looks a bit confusing. I'm trying to make this analogy on how plants grow and develop, and how this life cycle is going on, which you can bring into parallel from this learning process, and you know, you plant a seed of knowledge, and then the plan, and then this is sort of growing as something new, and this is how it continues. I think this will be drawn more beautifully by Ola in the next days. Right, so connecting to the very first presentation that we had yesterday, how to design such a course. My approach to it is to exactly create such learning cycles during the course, and this is why I say I think you do the same. You start with something, you have some learning objectives that come out of questions from participants, and then you create a space for reflection, for talking about concepts, developing concepts for practice, and this is sort of repeated in several cycles. Maybe just to give some examples of this different steps, like starting from the curiosity. This is a picture of an Etherpad where people collect their questions to the course, to the topic, and then we formulate learning objectives out of that, and sort of condense it to something that moves people together. This is just one example. It can look very differently in different courses. The learning objectives, I think for me, the differences in formulation is like, what is the approach you have for the different objectives? Is it just to give an overview? You want to create a deeper understanding? Should people be able to actually do something? You can't, you know, be as in depth in every part. And this is sort of a subject to agreement with the participants. And then you can start with what people actually have as experience and knowledge beforehand. And I like to use some sort of picture or some object to discuss this, and then people can you know, connect to that. And you can have such a very nice collection of ideas there, which tells you a lot about where people come from and where you can connect to. You can take any picture or any well, more complex maybe focus that you want to have. It doesn't really matter. And then the next step, for example, could be that people try and understand while they make a concept. In this case, for example, for an own garden plot, based on what they had reflected on before. The method here is a very specific one, but anyway, just to make the point, it can be done in a group together, or it can be done, for example, online, which is the picture on the right-hand side, where it's done online. So yeah, in this way, people create their own picture, and when it comes to practice, this is, I think, the kind of pictures that you already know from your own courses. I'm not telling anything new here anyway. Right. I think it is a practice to give offers for all senses, which I think we have heard already in other presentations. I might add here the smelling part, smelling the soil, and this I don't know. There is a wonderful project in Switzerland that's called Sounding Soil. It gives sort of it makes you hear all the noises that you can have in the different types of soils. So you have this, you hear all that, and that you normally don't hear. It's a language in soil that we don't know how to read, but we can hear differences in different types of soil. You might also have the kind of feeling like when you put your hand into a bag of seed, like the small boy here. it's, you know, it has a sort of feeling that tells you something. Okay, so much for experience. And then you go back to reflecting. And I think my role is to support these type of steps and to especially help in the reflecting part, to structure that a little bit. So I brought you some pictures to show how that can be done. This is sort of a picture that develops over time. And you can see with different phases of reflection, the picture gets more and more complete, and it looks different in each course. Even I do it on the same site, it changes because people view different things. All right, just to mention the people I learned from a lot, Christine Jones, working on soil ecology, Noemi Stadler-Kaulich in Bolivia, developing a method that's called dynamic agroforestry. It's also her who would a nice picture in the corner. And this is the farm that I learned a lot from, of the family of Langerhorst and Gertrud Frank. They sort of have often the same type of method that they use in farming. So I owe a lot to them. And well, this is how the farm looks there. They don't call it permaculture because they're older than the concept, but this is how it looks there. And Immo was there and he said, well, this is the perfect permaculture farm. And well, he must know. I don't. So I leave it at that. Yes, looking forward to more exchange.
Thank you, Susanne, for this presentation and for reflecting about what we may be already doing very naturally as we try to learn within a very dynamic garden or farm environment. The circle and cycle metaphor keeps repeating as we engage with this methodological discussion on permaculture education. Now I'd like to invite Claudia Krinska, a Warsaw-based community gardener, graduate of applied sociology and social anthropology from the University of Warsaw. For 6 years, she's been involved with co-creating communal garden at the Surewski Cultural Center in Warsaw. And she's also been collaborating in a wider network of food sovereignty in Poland. Today, she will share with us the topic of intergenerational collaboration and activization of seniors as part of urban community garden. And I welcome everyone and invite you to share your comments, share your experiences. We will circulate them so that we can also be in dialogue as we listen and reflect. And Claudia, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Jana. I will share my my screen. Okay. Can you see my presentation? Okay, great. Okay, hello everyone. And as Jana said before, I'm a graduate of sociology and cultural anthropology. And for 7 years now, I think I have been associated with community garden at the Służew Cultural Center. And this garden was established by an activist, Paulina Jeziorek, and all the examples that I will present today during my presentation are from the time when the garden was run by Paulina. So due to my education, what interests me most in gardening and in permaculture are the relationships between gardeners. So this aspect of people's care, and this topic I will develop now during the presentation. And the topic of this is all wisdom for modern hungry cities, how to activate seniors through urban gardening, because I believe that the seniors are one of the most vulnerable groups nowadays. I will to begin with, I will present some statistics, because as the World Urbanization Prospects report showed, in 2007, for the first time in history, it was reported that more people live in cities than in the rural areas. And nowadays it's more than a half of the world population. And forecasts assume that by 2050 it will be as much as 66 or even 68% of our population. Moreover, according to these reports, prospects show also that by 2050, 1 in 6 people in the world will be over the age of 65. So population aging is believed to be one of the global mega trends and is a global phenomenon, because almost every country in the world is experiencing this growth in the size and proportion of older people in the population. And this growing population of seniors is also influenced by another trend. And by this, I mean the change of the life model, and especially the rise of living alone. So the rise of the single person households. And it is said that single person households have become increasingly common in many countries across the world, and obviously also it is widely spread in Poland. So social connections and including contact with friends are now more important than ever. And these are things important for our emotional well-being and also for our health. And as single person households become more common, there are new challenges to connect and provide support to those living alone. And here we have a choice of various activities that allow us to include seniors in our communities. And one of the most obvious is gardening. And speaking about gardening, it is natural that our teacher in this aspect will be and can be permaculture. And not only this ethical triad and one of its pillars, and I mean take care of people, but also other permacultural principles tell us that we need to take care of our community. And one of the principles tells to integrate rather than segregate. So we can look at the seniors not as a separate group, but we can integrate them with others, with the rest of the gardeners. They can work successfully, for example, by teaching and by passing their knowledge to the younger generations. And it is quite natural and familiar field for seniors because of this simple fact that many of the people who are seniors now had an allotment gardens. Allotment gardens were very popular in Poland in the times of the People's Republic of Poland, and these were the places where people could do experiments, gardening experiments, and practice natural cultivation of vegetables and fruit trees. So in our contemporary urban gardens, they can therefore become experts in this field, and by this they can gain authority and find their place in our diverse gardening group. So while planning how to invite seniors to our gardens, we have to take into consideration 3 crucial aspects. First of all, space. We have to remember to prepare our garden infrastructure, and that will take into account the needs of seniors. For example, raised beds or cultivation bags can be really helpful here, but also we can have tables for preparing seedlings or growing herbs. And also, apart from the working area, we have to remember about preparing the resting areas, like sheltered areas or benches that we can just sit on and talk with each other. A second aspect are people, seniors themselves, and we can include them in our community by treating them as teachers. So they can be teachers and students both. And last but not least, we have to plan some activities that will integrate them, and we can strengthen our bonds by doing things together. And here we can do cooking, baking bread together, or plan walks along the trail of wild edible plants which grow nearby our garden. And while this walks, seniors can be treated as local guides who know the history of the place very well. And here are our gardener community. As I mentioned before, the garden was established by two activists, and one of them is Paulina Jeziorek, and all the examples that I have here are from the time where Paulina was the leader of our garden. So here are these bags in which we cultivate some plants. Here are the workshops. The second one, the second which you can see on the right side, is workshop on pruning fruit shrubs and trees. And it was it occurred to be very interesting for the group of seniors. Another example is a workshop on taking care of indoor plants. Here we also have culinary workshop and baking bread together. And permaculture, however, can teach us not only to take care of people, but also how to reach them with our actions, because the main obstacle is how to invite them to our garden and how to inform them. So here we can look at our garden as a permaculture zones, and to reach our target group with our activities, we can use the circles of engagement model. And the author of the model is Mike Balford, but the concept was taken from the group, from the book by Pastor Rick Warren, entitled Purpose-Driven Church. And I will just run through this briefly, just to show what the circles of engagement are. So core members, involved, ordinary members, supporters, passers-by, and potentially interested. So we have to remember of all these groups while planning our garden activities and work schedule. And so to sum up and run through the key points, preparation of garden infrastructure is very important, and planning activities that will be easily accessible and interesting for seniors. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Claudia. As was already mentioned by Thomas and then Susanne, like taking this possibility to explore as a group with particular character or specification, our shared interest and also our shared skills, because perhaps in Poland, like in other countries, the seniors might be the bearers of traditional knowledge. It can be very helpful to structure the learning process. And I hope we will hear a similarly interesting take on working with different different groups, including people without distinguishing them in the learning process, from Habiba Youseff, who is originally from Lebanon and a resident of Spain. Habiba has academic background in economics and sustainability and has worked internationally in international aid, but currently she is a co-founder and one of the coordinators of a land regenerative community, La Bolina, in Granada in southern Spain, and she conducts both trainings in agroecology and permaculture, as well as involving migrant workers and migrant learners, but also takes a bigger political and system perspective on creating local food sovereignty economies. So Habiba, welcome to our gathering, and the voice is over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Joanna. You see well the screen? Okay, thank you. So I would like to start with this slide. If you could please take like just a second and look at the illustrations, and if you could describe in the chat for 30 seconds, 1 minute, what does this represent to you in the framework of, in the context of the supermarket culture? I'm sorry, I cannot.
We are getting
like pass.
You're maybe not seeing the chat, but there's some answers: separation from nature, dependency, alienation, plastic desert, dependence on capitalism for food.
Bye. Okay, thank you. So yeah, my name is Habiba, as Joanna said, and we are. I'm part of La Bolina, which we live in the south of Spain. And when we were asked a little bit to offer like a view on how can educators in agroecology and permaculture encourage other people to join those efforts. One of the proposals that we have really through, it's like through collectivity and empowered migration. So one of the first ideas I would like to share here, it's the importance of the cities and the importance of the urban and rural connection. So in cities, really, in the context of the supermarket, we see a lot of people that don't have really time to put into basic necessities, such as food and preparing food. And we also see in the supermarket, like a lot of shelves with a lot of single-use package prepared food that sometimes are considered healthy, like salads, for example, where really they are not that healthy as they appear. And so, as we already said, like cities is a big market. There are a lot of people that have to eat in the city. So it's a big market. So in order to have any change of paradigm in the food growing system, cities, of course, should be included, and the behavior of citizens also should be changed. No, especially for young people and for children, like, to begin their education, so that those people can integrate those changes in their behavior. Then, of course, like a food growing educator, we can show people all the regenerative permaculture agroecological techniques to grow food. But as you are facing like a very big system, that is the system of the supermarket, which is very big and touches many aspects, we should also like provide team up and be able to provide like a device, let's say, that is as strong to scale up a little bit the efforts, so we can really offer an answer to an viable alternative to the people that now go, for example, to the supermarket. So this is like a proposal a little bit, and it's also based on our experience at La Bolina. Of course, we have like the education, the courses, but behind this, to be able to really, I repeat myself, make a change, we have a whole team of people working to be able to produce a change of paradigm, a change of perspective. So here you can read, for example, we have the commercialization coordinator, we have communication and event, we have cultural events. You also have to have like a global view to be able also to change on higher level, like policy makers and such. We have migrants, volunteers, and I put here also, for example, the COVID-19, which for me is an awareness about the limits of human on this planet, because we really saw a change of people, like people were buying more organic food last year. We saw it in our baskets, no? So we should like take advantage somehow of this awareness that's being built up and continue. What I would like also to share with you, it's about migration. So the food system in many parts of the world, let's talk about Europe now, but also in other parts, is like the food production is relying mainly on migrant work. Here in Spain, we have the example of Almeria. And we are talking about cheap labor without any legal protection that make this food system, as they say, viable economically, but which doesn't include any externality that come from the social, the cultural, the environmental problems that arise. So, and many people, buyers of this food in Europe, like for example, in let's say in Northern Europe or in other countries that are not Spain, because Spain exports a lot, of course, not many people or not all people are aware of where this food comes from and the conditions it is produced. So as educators, if we can include the migrants that are interested into the awareness building, into knowing more techniques of regenerative agriculture, of agroecology, of permaculture, like this, we can also, like they can also join this revolution, no? And because they have so much power in their hand, if it's used in another way, for me, it is really very essential that this collective is integrated, and it can be also integrated through the ethics of permaculture, which is people care, the earth care, and the fair share, so that those people really feel welcomed when they come to a new place. They don't see working in agriculture as a failure, because many people see, as it was mentioned in other presentations, working in agriculture is a failure. Going back to the rural is failure. So also to share with them how all of us here see what could be agriculture and permaculture, and share with them this view, so they can feel empowered and they can sum up to all the efforts that we are doing now. And finally, one of I think one of the most important tasks that we have as educators is also to show the connection that we have with nature, with the ecosystem, and with the environment. And this environment, it could be natural or it could be urban. It's just the environment we grow with, and how do we have an impact on it, and how it impacts us. So one of the thing, this is also maybe I'm interested really in knowing more opinions, but what I would like to say now is that if we are going to produce for commercial use, we are going to have a strong impact on our natural environment. No, I would like to hear more opinions, but like if you are doing like a food forest, which it auto-aliments itself, it's not the same maybe than to produce for a big city and to have like 100 baskets, maybe. So we are going to have an impact, but this impact, it could be positive, it could be regenerative through many techniques like microorganism, purines, no digs, many things that we know here. So to add to this, like we have what I say, it's the tomato story. So the tomato really, as any plants, they have to adapt to their environment. They emit smells that can attract some insects to protect them from other offensive insects. So little by little, as the tomato and the seed is local, it's maintained, this plant develop like an adaptation to the environment. And this is really, it can be so much like transposed also to any migrant, any person that moves from one place to another. So I have like a series of questions that you can see on the screen, which is a dynamic that we can do. Entonces, we say at the beginning, how did you feel when you first arrived to a new, maybe offensive place? What surprised you more? What difficulty did you experience? How was your body feeling? This could be done through talking or also through embodiment, no? And then describe how you feel now after some time have passed. How did you adapt? What connection did you make? So I would just like to finish on this thing of what I call the tomato story. Thank you very much for your attention, and yeah, a pleasure. Thank you.
Habiba, thank you so much for giving us a presentation that closes the block on community, but with a very strong accent on inclusion and on awareness that those who produce our mainstream food are often those who are also in food poverty and are in hard labor, unprotected labor conditions. And there are ways in which this, maybe even the metaphor of a migrant can be applied in our communities, just in terms of how we see others around who might be on the fringe or who might need just this little extra support to transition to more empowered place. So yes, and thank you for those great questions at the end that we can use to strengthen the connection with those that we grow food and learn with. Now we will have we will close this block and we will resume briefly for the next block about imagination. We are a little bit over time, so instead of half an hour, we'll take 20-minute break, and we will make more space for discussion after this period of regeneration, where we can join with those presenters from this block and all others in a closing session. So we will meet here at exactly 1:10 p.m. Central and Eastern European time, so in 20 minutes. You can stay online if you're on Zoom, or if you're watching us on live stream. Share your comments. We will also harvest them and keep for exchange after we come back. Anya and Veronica, would you like to add anything as we are moving on to disperse?
No, thank you. We are working on the comments. Yes. So we are listening. We've been listening the whole blog, but at the same time we are trying to combine the comments from YouTube and from Facebook and from our Zoom chat to be seen for everyone, for people watching us in social media, as well for the others.
Yeah, the Zoom participants were very active, and thank you for commenting and engaging. I see a lively discussion. So see you soon.
Great. See you at 1:10. Thank you everyone for support, attention, and exchange, and have a good rest before we launch into hopefully a very relaxed block about imagination, since you cannot strive and force the imagination. So see you after a break.